The cameras flashed, but the air in the room was heavier than light. A 37-year-old soldier dressed not in the silk of politicians, but in the plain uniform of a fighter sat before more than 15 journalists. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the revolutionary leader of Burkina Faso, was not hiding behind a podium or speaking from a golden palace. He faced the press eye to eye as if speaking to brothers and sisters in the trenches of a struggle that has lasted generations. This was not just another press conference. It was the commemoration of 3 years since his daring rise to power, 3 years of relentless assassination plots, coup attempts, and foreign encirclement designed to crush a young nation's dream of sovereignty. Reporters asked him the questions many of us would never dare to voice aloud. Mr. President, are you ever afraid? How do you survive when history shows that Africa's brightest lights, Lumumba and Nkrumah, Sankara Gaddafi, were all extinguished by imperial hands? The answer shook the room. Traoré declared that his strength comes from trust in his people, trust in the mission they gave him, trust that fear itself is the quickest path to defeat. He reminded the world that if soldiers are trained by foreign masters, they carry foreign loyalties. But when a nation trains its own, it forges a shield no enemy can infiltrate. And so the question now is not only whether Captain Ibrahim Traoré can survive the storms ahead, but whether Africa itself can break the chains of dependency and betrayal that have strangled it for decades. Can Burkina Faso truly chart its own course? Or will the empire's shadow swallow yet another revolutionary? Before we dive into the heart of this press conference, his fiery answers on security, land, economy, and Africa's silence on Palestine and Congo, I invite you to stay with me. Please share this video if you feel you are one of the first to stand with President Ibrahim Traoré. And don't forget to subscribe if you believe that the truth is more important than the headlines. The room fell silent when one journalist leaned forward and asked the question everyone carried in their hearts. Mr. President, you've survived several coup attempts in just this past year. Assassination plots surround you from every corner. Do you ever feel afraid? For a brief second time, froze. The weight of history of Lumumba murdered in the Congo and Nkrumah overthrown in Ghana, Sankara shot in the very soil of Burkina Faso hung in the air like a shadow. Then, with the calm of a man who has already measured the cost of revolution, Captain Ibrahim Traoré answered, "I am not afraid. My only strength is the trust I have in my people. Fear leads to hesitation, hesitation to compromise, and once compromise sets in, you are finished." This was not bravado, it was a philosophy. Traoré reminded the press that revolutions cannot be built on fear. They are sustained by the bond between a leader and his people. He emphasized that the mission given to him was not his alone, it was entrusted by the Burkinabe people, and as long as he honors that trust, he carries a shield stronger than any bullet. But he did not stop there. He drew attention to one of the most decisive changes under his leadership, the reconstruction of Burkina Faso's armed forces. Just a few years earlier, many officers in the field fought without clarity, not knowing who the enemy truly was or why they were risking their lives. Today, Traoré insisted the purpose is clear: fight for the sovereignty of the nation and defend the people. To ensure this clarity, he established a higher military institute to train soldiers in Burkina Faso with values defined by Burkinabe, not foreign powers. Here, his words struck at the core of imperial manipulation. If you let your forces be trained by other powers, he warned, they put into their heads whatever they want. They indoctrinate them as they please, and it becomes easier to manipulate them. Instead, Burkina Faso now forges its soldiers through lived battlefield experience, guided by commanders who understand the terrain, the culture, and the stakes of this struggle. Traoré himself, he revealed, had personally participated in the training of some units in the early days, ensuring that the army's spirit was born from within. This approach unsettles former colonial masters. For decades, France and the United States used military training programs as tools of influence, creating officers who were loyal not to their nations, but to the hand that fed them. That was the pipeline through which coups were orchestrated, through which heroes like Sankara were betrayed. Today, Traoré has cut that pipeline. In doing so, he has created a force that is disciplined, loyal, and rooted in the soil of Burkina Faso itself. The symbolism was not lost on the room. Here was a president who did not speak about security as a privilege of elites guarded by foreign mercenaries, but as a collective duty. Security is not only for the men who guard me, he said. It is the responsibility of the entire people. It is about behavior, ways of living, lessons learned from the past. We will not let history repeat itself. The power of this message lay in its intimacy. Traoré was not only speaking as a head of state, but as a soldier among soldiers, as a brother among brothers. He placed his fate and the fate of his government in the hands of the very people who once toppled tyrants and now demand dignity. And perhaps that is why the question of fear seemed almost irrelevant by the time he finished speaking. To fear is human, yes. But to surrender to fear is to betray a revolution. Traoré made clear that his revolution is built on a different foundation: trust, clarity of purpose, and a homegrown army that no empire can infiltrate. For the first time in decades, Burkina Faso's destiny was no longer guarded by outsiders. It was defended by its own sons and daughters, people who know why they fight, who they fight against, and what future they are building. If the first part of the press conference revealed Traoré's inner strength, the second unveiled the storm raging around Burkina Faso. The questions turned to geopolitics, and the atmosphere in the hall thickened. Mr. President, one reporter asked, "Do you believe that Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the AES alliance, are being encircled?" Traoré did not hesitate. His gaze sharpened. Yes, it is a logic that surrounds us, a logic that seeks to bring us down. Look to Côte d'Ivoire, a base in Odiané just near our border, Senegal setting up units near Mali, Benin hosting French and American forces along Burkina Faso's frontier. We are literally ringed by camps designed not to protect Africa, but to suffocate it. This was the crescendo of the press conference, the moment when the quiet strength of his earlier words gave way to the roar of defiance. To many in the audience, it was a chilling reminder of history. Africa's revolutions, from Lumumba to Sankara, always crushed not only from within, but by encirclement from without. Yet Traoré refused to despair. Instead, he declared a doctrine. In Africa, they told us not to build strong armies. They flattered us, told us we were children, and that they, the foreigners, must provide our security. And many leaders believed it. They betrayed their own people. But today we build our army in Burkina Faso. We fight in Burkina Faso. We train in Burkina Faso. And no one outside knows how our commandos are trained, how they fight, or how they think. This is our shield. It was a thunderous rejection of dependency, a reversal of decades of Western manipulation. For the first time, instead of begging for military protection, Burkina Faso had become the place where even foreign powers now quietly seek to learn how African soldiers are trained. The tables had turned. The room buzzed, but the press was not finished. One journalist shifted the focus from borders to voices. "Mr. President, do you have a problem with us, the media?" Here Traoré's response cut sharper than any blade. He accused African media of being mouthpieces of imperialism, repeating French headlines without thought, calling him a putschist because Paris chose that word. Why, he demanded. That is still slavery. You went to their schools. You learned their journalism. But this homeland is yours. Every journalist must fight for their own country. If the French can protect their interests, why can't we? The rebuke was scorching, but it was also layered with an uncomfortable truth. Many in the room had been educated in Europe, had internalized its frameworks, and now shaped African narratives with borrowed eyes. Traoré challenged them to decolonize their mindset, to cover not only the trains that are late, but also the ones that arrive on time, to tell the stories of progress, not just the failures that feed Western headlines. The climax of his tirade came with a metaphor. Our jersey may be stained with blood, mud, and sweat, but never with shame. The hall erupted in murmurs. It was not only a statement about the government, it was a call to journalists, intellectuals, and citizens alike embrace sacrifice, but never dishonor. The reactions were divided. Some reporters sat in stunned silence, others scribbled furiously, aware they had just been scolded on their own turf. But among ordinary Burkinabés listening from afar, Traoré's words resonated like a battle cry. Here was a leader not bowing to foreign media narratives, but demanding that Africans reclaim their story. For the AES alliance, the message was equally clear. Encirclement is real, but so is resistance. Against bases, betrayals, and media manipulation, Traoré was erecting walls of trust, discipline, and a sovereign voice. And in that moment, the press conference ceased to be a routine political ritual. It became a battlefield of ideas, a confrontation between Africa's lingering colonial chains and the raw determination of a nation refusing to kneel. When the questions turned from soldiers and borders to the daily struggles of citizens, Captain Traoré's tone shifted. The battlefield was not only in the Sahel, it was in the villages, the markets, and the very soil of Burkina Faso. One reporter asked about land, a topic that has torn communities apart for generations. Families divided, machetes drawn, blood spilled over disputed plots. Traoré did not mince words. The state must take responsibility. Land belongs to the nation. We cannot allow speculators to divide our people any longer. He exposed the ugly truth. In 2010, fewer than 20 real estate developers operated in Burkina Faso. By 2015, that number had exploded to more than 200. They bought vast areas of land, sliced it into plots, resold it multiple times, and left ordinary families in chaos. In some cities, a single piece of land was sold to 3 or 4 different buyers, each holding fraudulent documents. The result was violence, lawsuits, and broken trust. The solution came through the revolution. Traoré introduced SECAD, a digital land registry designed to eliminate duplicates, restore transparency, and prevent corruption. For a nation where paper records could be altered or lost, digitization was not just modernization, it was survival. By reasserting state control over land, the government was striking at the root of social division and reclaiming one of the most precious resources from the hands of profiteers. But the reforms went beyond documents. Traoré turned to the role of traditional chiefs, long manipulated by politicians. Once respected as guardians of cohesion, many had been reduced to pawns, losing the confidence of their people. "We must restore their dignity," he said. A new law granted chiefs symbolic privileges and authority, encouraging them to mediate disputes and serve again as pillars of unity. The intent was clear: where politicians sowed division, tradition would heal. Then came the economy. Despite relentless attacks and international isolation, Burkina Faso's growth rate in 2024 stood at 1.5%. Traoré credited this resilience to 3 fronts: agriculture, mining, and services. Large swathes of land once too insecure to farm had been reclaimed. Production surged, creating both food security and export surpluses. Mining, too, was transformed. Traoré reminded the audience how foreign companies once took 90% of profits, leaving the state with a mere 10%, often without oversight. Now, under his leadership, Burkina Faso was reclaiming control. Mines abandoned since 2018 had reopened, revenues began to flow, and gold was once again in Burkinabe hands. It was not total independence yet, but the trajectory had shifted from dependency to co-management, from blindness to accountability. Yet perhaps his most powerful statement was not about GDP or gold. It was about the price of food. When the finance minister brings me growth numbers, he said, I ask, how much is a can of corn? How much is millet at the market? If prices go down, then we know the people feel the impact. That is what matters. In that sentence, Traoré collapsed the distance between macroeconomics and daily survival. He was not a president quoting statistics to impress investors. He was a leader checking the price of grain to measure justice. The political consequences were profound. By confronting land corruption, elevating traditional chiefs, and ensuring that economic reforms reached the poorest, Traoré was weaving a new social contract. One that promised dignity, fairness, and sovereignty, not as abstract ideals, but as lived realities. And so while his army fought jihadists in the north, his government was fighting another war at home against speculation, inequality, and hunger. In both battles, the objective was the same: to restore to the Burkinabe people what had long been stolen from them. The press conference could not avoid the larger stage, the place of Burkina Faso in Africa and the world. One journalist asked bluntly, "Mr. President, what are you still doing in the African Union?" The room stirred, for the AU had suspended Burkina Faso after the coup, leaving the nation in limbo. Traoré's reply was laced with irony. "Honestly, I don't know if we are in the Union or not. We have heard nothing, no communication. It is complete radio silence." His words revealed the emptiness of continental institutions that claim to represent Africa, yet often serve external powers. He compared it to ECOWAS, which Burkina Faso and its AES partners had already left. If we leave, at least we want to explain to our people why. But today, even we don't know why the AU treats us this way. His frustration was not just with bureaucracy, but with the failure of Africa's own structures to defend Africans. The conversation then turned to Palestine, a subject the West often frames but rarely solves. Could Burkina Faso recognize a Palestinian state? Traoré's answer was resolute. Why not? It is a state. Otherwise, this war will never end. His voice carried both empathy and urgency, noting that where the West unites swiftly in defense of Europe, Africa remains fragmented even as millions die in Congo. For 10 years, Burkina has been at war. Have you heard a single African country raise its voice for us? Congo bleeds with millions of deaths. And yet silence. It was a painful truth. Africa's disunity prevents it from defending itself, let alone others. Traoré's warning was clear: until Africans speak with one voice, the continent will remain vulnerable to manipulation and neglect. But even as he lamented, he pointed to another path: technology and self-reliance. In Moscow, at the Russia-Africa summit, he told President Putin, "Do not just give us fish, teach us how to fish." It was a demand for technology transfer, not charity. Burkina Faso has since sent students to study nuclear science, advanced engineering, and military technology in Russia and China. An atomic agency was created, scholarships multiplied, and doors opened to knowledge once reserved for the West. This was more than education. It was strategy. By diversifying partnerships, Burkina Faso was rejecting dependency on the United States and Europe, forging instead a future where Africans master the tools of modern power, from energy to weapons. "We have brains too," Traoré insisted. "Why should others always train us as if we were children?" For Washington, this message is unsettling. U.S. generals publicly warned that African countries do not need to be militarized, even as America expands its own bases on African soil. The contradiction is glaring. The very nations that encircle Burkina Faso with troops insist it should remain weak. Traoré's stance: build strength at home, train at home, learn from allies willing to share knowledge, is a direct rejection of this hypocrisy. And so, through the lens of this press conference, the world glimpsed the new identity of Burkina Faso: suspended by the AU, distrusted by the West, yet rising as a voice for Palestine, for Congo, for every forgotten African nation. A small landlocked country, but one refusing to be landlocked in spirit. In Traoré's words, the measure of global justice was not written in resolutions from New York or Brussels. It was written in the lives of Africans, whether they could defend their land, control their wealth, and speak without fear. As the press conference drew to a close, one could not help but feel that this was more than politics. It was history unfolding in real time. A young soldier, only 37 years old, stood in the shadow of fallen giants Lumumba Sankara Gaddafi and declared that he would not bend, would not compromise, would not surrender the revolution to fear. But the danger remains. Encircled by foreign bases, infiltrated by spies, targeted by plots, the parallels with Africa's tragic past are impossible to ignore. The first duty of a revolutionary, they say, is to stay alive. And every moment Captain Ibrahim Traoré survives is a defiance of empire itself. Yet this story is no longer just about one man. It is about whether a continent long divided can finally unite. Whether Africans can trust their own soldiers, their own journalists, their own chiefs and leaders, instead of outsourcing trust to the very powers that enslaved them. Traoré's challenge was clear: decolonize your mind, decolonize your economy, decolonize your future. For audiences in America, the question lingers with sharp weight. Can a small nation like Burkina Faso truly withstand the storm of global powers? Or is Traoré's revolution destined to meet the same fate as those before him? And deeper still, do you believe President Ibrahim Traoré's strategies for national reform are truly effective, or should another successor prepare to continue this fight? The warning is urgent. If history repeats itself, if another African lion is silenced, it will not only be Burkina Faso that suffers. It will be Africa's hope for sovereignty and perhaps the world's chance to see a new dawn crushed once more under the boots of empire. But if this revolution endures, if the land reforms hold, if the army remains unbroken, if the people's trust does not waver, then a miracle may yet rise from Ouagadougou, inspiring millions across Africa and the diaspora. So I turn to you. Please share this story if you feel you are one of the first to know and support President Ibrahim Traoré. Comment below, do you think Burkina Faso can survive this encirclement? And subscribe if you believe that the truth spoken raw and unfiltered is more important than the headlines. Africa's dawn has begun. The question is, will we keep the fire alive?